and welcome back to the channel. Today we are just going to have a little chat about afterthought thumbs in particular, but the concept of the afterthought addition to our knit garments. So when we use the term afterthought, what we generally mean is that we skip whatever it is at the time we're knitting the main body of the thing, and then we go back and add it in later. Mostly what we're talking about here are thumbs for mittens and heels for socks. And a really common time that you will see this is when we are doing color work. The traditional mitten, if you have a thumb gusset kind of coming up here, it is difficult to maintain a stitch pattern. So, maybe we want a stitch pattern going all the way up the side of the thumb, but then what happens when we remove the thumb? So we put our thumb gusset stitches on hold and we continue our mitten, but we've taken all those stitches out and now the two sides of our pattern aren't going to be matching up. Or we want to knit our mitten thumb in a solid color, but if we are increasing, usually depending on the weight of your yarn, 13, 15, 18 stitches here, you can't be carrying your colorwork yarns across that. So the solution is an afterthought thumb. And I'm going to be demonstrating this particular technique. I'm sure there are other ways to do it, but I like this one for the slightly less scary potential. So in this case, to create an afterthought thumb, what I have done while knitting the main part of my mitten is I got to these stitches where I want to put my thumb in. I worked across the stitches in a piece of scrap yarn. Then I slipped those stitches back to my left needle and worked across them again in pattern. All right, so let's just do a quick demo on how to go about putting your waste yarn in for your afterthought thumb. So I'm just going to work to the point where I want my thumb to be, which is, this is for my right hand, so it's going right about here. And once I'm there, I'm going to take my scrap yarn. Again, I would not use just a spare piece of your main yarn, especially if you're doing color work. You're usually using a nice sticky non-superwash wool, and you want something that is going to be easier to remove. So I'm using some cotton linen or linen silk or something that I just found in my stash. And then for your thumb, what you're going to do is work across whatever the number of stitches given is. So for example, if you want later 20 stitches for your thumb, you're going to do half that many here, and you're just going to work across. You don't have to worry about a pattern. 10 stitches. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so those will eventually become our thumb. Now we're going to slide them back onto the left needle. Oops, not you, just the blue one. Come on, there we go. So we're going to slide all 10 back to the left needle, and then we're going to work across them again in our pattern. So when we added our scrap yarn, we just did it in a plain stockinette. Now we want to continue our pattern. So I will just work across those 10 stitches in pattern. And then once I have done that, I don't really have to worry about them again until it is time to do my thumb. So I am going to tighten that up a little bit so it's not giving us a wonky tension or anything, but basically now I don't have to do anything with those stitches until it is time to remove them for the thumb. I will just continue working my mitten in pattern as I have been doing. Just basically pretending those stitches, that blue thread is not there. Let's just get to the end of the row so we can see how it looks. All right. So there they are. They're holding the place for my right thumb. This will eventually go in that spot, but for now, I can now continue working my mitten in this colorwork pattern in the round, and then go back later and open up a space for a thumb relatively easily. So we'll show that step next. And what that does, it's just created right here a line of stitches that can be removed, and when you do that, the stitches above and the stitches below are both sides are going to be live stitches. So could you just cut a strand of the main yarn in your knitting and create a hole? Absolutely. But let's face it, that is pretty scary. So in this case, you are just going to remove this, and I will probably just cut through it to make things easier, but you don't need to. You can get, so here it is on the inside. And you could just take a yarn needle or something and pull that tail loose out to the front to pull this out. But for the sake of ease, I'm probably just going to cut through it. And then once you have pulled that out, you will have these live stitches. If that still seems pretty scary, you can actually go in and pick up the stitches before you take this out. And the same is true if you are doing this for a sock heel. So in a sock heel, you would work this, all the way across the back of a sock, a spare piece of scrap yarn, and you would do the same thing. In that case, that would be to put in a short row heel without interrupting a pattern. So for example, if you have a self-striping yarn and you want to maintain that stripe sequence all the way down the leg and down the foot, if you work a heel, you will not be maintaining that stripe sequence. So you can put in a piece of scrap yarn, continue to work the whole sock, and then go back, pull out the scrap yarn, and use a contrast color to put a short row heel in, because you've got two sets of live stitches. But in this case, we have a mitten. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you how you would pick up those stitches if you want to do that first. And then I will remove the yarn. So you only need to pick up one leg of each stitch above and below. So I'm going to start with the stitches above. And so we want to pick up one leg of the stitch, but not the scrap yarn. If you find that you have picked up the leg of the stitch, the back leg rather than the front, then you would just knit your first round through the back loop, easy peasy. So there we go. You can see I'm just picking up one leg of the stitch right above our scrap yarn. And it is helpful to know how many stitches. So of course you can go in and count, but just in case, you should know. So this is 10 stitches. And yes, I can count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. But on the off chance that something is kind of getting pulled into the fabric, you can't see it well, you should know how many stitches you have worked across with your scrap yarn. So I'm just picking up one leg of each stitch above the blue V's. when I am done, come on, I should have 10 above. Here's the last one. So here's the last blue V. And here is the last leg. Do I have 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite end. So for my purposes, I'm going to slide this out. I'm going to flip this over so that I'm approaching it from the opposite side. And I'm just going to do the same thing. So I'm going to pick up the leg, one leg of each stitch below our little blue V's here. All right, so I'm going to try to go in here and pick up the left leg of each stitch. We're starting here, so you can see the blue here. And that means here is the stitch that the blue is working into. So you're going to pick up this left leg. All right, so now we've got stitches above and below. Some of them might be oriented backwards. I may have picked up, a left leg and a right leg together. I don't know. We'll find out when we pull this out, but nothing can go anywhere because we've picked up all of the stitches above and below. So let's see what happens. So I can, all right, oops, I'm pulling a stitch. So I've got my scissors and I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it just to make it a little easier. And then I'm gonna use just a spare needle tip to go in and pull the scrap yarn out. So in this particular instance, I am using Knit Picks palette for my color work. It is a very sticky yarn, and it's pretty much always a good idea to use a not sticky yarn for your scrap yarn. So in this case, I've got some, I think it was some kind of linen cotton blend, and that is usually a good choice. You don't want a sticky yarn because you want this to come out relatively easily. And actually what I'm going to do is with the other end, I'm going to cut it again. That way the long tails that are inside, I don't have to pull all the way out. And we'll see what we got. All right, so we've taken that out. We've taken that out. There's the tail still in there. We don't need that. And what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches. And 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 stitches. So now we have 20 stitches that we can work our thumb with. So now that that has come out, as I said, grabbing these stitches ahead of time is completely optional. This is a very sticky yarn. So if I had just pulled that out, most of these would have just, stayed there anyway. They're not going anywhere because it's a sticky yarn. But it can give you a little bit of less anxiety, which is always good. Let's split a little bit. If you just go ahead and pick them up, but you don't have to. So if you are using, get on there we go. If you are using a very sticky yarn, don't feel like you have to go in and pick those stitches up. You can just pull that scrap yarn out and let the stitches hang. But here we go. So now I've got a nice hole, but I don't have any loose stitches here. Everything is nice and secure. My colorwork pattern hasn't been interrupted, and now what I'm going to do is just join, my main color yarn and add my thumb like I normally would. You might pick up an extra stitch on either side to make sure that you close up any gaps. You won't, because you put this scrap yarn in for the afterthought heel or afterthought thumb, you won't have, as with the traditional mitten, you won't have the tails from the thumb gusset to close up any gaps. So you do probably want to be extra careful picking up stitches at the edges to close up any gaps. So let's just try to join my yarn and see how things look. Again, this same basic premise is what you're going to do for a sock heel as well, an afterthought heel. All right, I am doing magic loop. This one stitch is not cooperating with me. I can't get the both plies. There we go. Okay, now we got all the plies. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and in the middle of this stitch, I'm going to pick up an extra stitch. So you can see here's the V's for the column of stitches. And I'm going to reach into the middle and pick up an extra stitch right in the middle here. No, just the white, not the purple, to help close up that gap. So I'm going to pick that up, put that on my needle. Then I'm going to join my yarn. And I'm going to work to the end of the first half of my stitches. Again, so far it's not looking like any of my stitches are backward, but if they were, I would just knit them through the back loop. You do want to make sure, you know, if you've missed a ply or something, we fix that up. All right, I'm gonna flip around. Now I got the other half of my stitches again. I think I'm gonna reach right in here to this column of stitches, pick up an extra stitch. One of the tricky problems with color work is that you don't just have stitches here, you've got strands, the strands from your from your color work. So you want to make sure you're actually picking up an extra stitch and not a float. Does look like my stitches here are oriented the other way, so I'm just going to knit them through the back loop. All right, so now I've got 2 halves of a thumb ready to be worked. No drop stitches, nothing hanging loose. You will have one end here where you joined your yarn that you'll be able to use to close up any gaps as necessary. But overall, this is looking good, and it's giving you a nice seamless thumb that doesn't interrupt your color work pattern, or in the case of socks, your self-striping or whatever it may be. As I said, using the piece of scrap yarn to mark your spot is a little bit less scary, but it's not always necessary, especially if you're using a pretty sticky yarn. And this is a very convenient way to add a thumb to a mitten or a heel to a sock without interrupting an existing pattern. All right, and then just a real quick peek at the thumb now that it is done, so you can see this blends seamlessly in on both sides. Gives you a nice contrast color. Now I am going to put this on my hand, but 1, it is not blocked, so it's a little small, and 2, I'm really stubborn and I hate carrying yarn up the side. So there's a lot of yarn tails in here that I haven't taken care of. But there we go. So you can see nice, neat, picking up that extra stitch. Give us nice, neat edges here. No gaps. And again, it's, you know, it's looking a little tight because it hasn't been blocked, but a nice afterthought thumb. Easy peasy. I hope you found this tutorial useful, educational. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. New knitting videos here every Saturday. Thanks for checking out this video, and I will see you soon in another video. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for this video. As I said, the technique here can be used for both mittens and socks, pretty much the same thing. And you don't have to pick up your stitches, but it can make it a little bit less nerve-wracking. Thanks again for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful or educational, please do give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. New knitting videos here every Saturday. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you soon in another video.